The Haunted Mansion is a fun family film and it turned out okay, so let's talk about it. As always, this video will have spoilers, so if you don't want spoilers, head over to my shorts or my TikTok and check out my one-take movie review on this movie. But without further ado, let's talk about Haunted Mansion. Now, as I said, this was just a fun movie, and I can see where a lot of people may like this movie, but I can also see where a lot of people may not like this movie. And for me, I'm kind of in the middle with this movie. Now, I do think it did a great job at representing the Haunted Mansion ride at Disney World. I think it did that ride justice because this is pretty much taking this ride and putting it in a movie. And at the end of the day, I think this is going to be one of those movies that families can turn on during Halloween time and enjoy together. So let's get into what this movie is about. So in this movie, we see a mother and a son move into the Haunted Mansion, and then they call the main character, who is Ben, played by LaKeith Stanfield, who does a great job in this movie, but I'll get into that a little later. But anyways, he's called in to inspect this house, and then they slowly find themselves with a group of people trying to figure out how to get out of this haunted mansion that they've been trapped in. Jumping right into the good, and the first thing I have here is LaKeith Stanfield, and honestly, I thought he was the best part of this movie. He was probably one of the only characters I genuinely cared about in this movie, and that's not saying that the other characters were bad. They definitely all had their moments, but LaKeith Stanfield as Ben in this movie was easily the standout. His character dealt with a lot of grief in this movie, and that was kind of an overarching theme throughout this whole film. But towards the middle / end of this movie, his character had this monologue where he opened up about his past, and I thought this was one of the more emotional parts of this movie, and it worked really well. In this scene, LaKeith Stanfield really delivered his lines perfectly. He had the tears flowing, which I'm always impressed when an actor can cry on command. But anyways, this scene really made you feel for his character as he kind of opened up and explained what happened to his wife. And on top of that, he really just carried a lot of the emotional moments in this film, and his character was the only one that had a really solid arc in this movie, in my opinion. And overall, LaKeith Stanfield was just a joy and a lot of fun to watch on screen. And next up for the good, I have the last third of the movie. Now, I thought the first 2/3 of this movie was just okay, but once we got to that last third, I thought it was pretty good and honestly kind of served as a saving grace for this movie, in my opinion. It had a few wholesome moments that paid off things that happened earlier in the movie. For instance, at the very end of the movie where Ben saw the cat on his porch, and that cat's name ended up being Tater Tot as a little ghost wink from his wife, I thought that was a pretty wholesome part of the movie. I also liked the reveal when we found out that Travis's dad was dead and that Travis was actually the willing soul that Crump wanted, and I thought this kind of added some stakes to the movie because throughout this whole movie we thought that willing soul was going to be Ben, and then it ended up being Travis, and now we have to work on saving Travis from becoming that willing soul. And I just thought that was a really cool kind of twist to this movie, a fun twist if I do say so myself, and it also allowed Ben and Travis to kind of connect there at the end on their grief when Ben saved Travis from Crump. Anyways, I thought the third act was just a lot of fun. I thought it was one of the stronger points of this movie, even though it did take us a little bit of time to get there. And finally, for the good, I have all the Easter eggs / references that we got to the Haunted Mansion ride in Disney World / Land, because I think there's one there too. But I will say these Easter eggs and references were everywhere in this movie, and I really appreciated that. So pretty much they just took the ride in Disney World and plopped it right here into the movie, and it was pretty cool to see on the big screen, from seeing the ghost in the mirror to the extremely long creepy hallways, and even they took some dialogue from the ride as well and used it in this movie. But my favorite part is when they were in that room kind of towards the end of the movie where the walls kind of expand and you kind of reveal the pictures on the wall. Just as a kid, when I rode this ride, that was my favorite part of the ride, and for some reason I remember that part. I think it was when you were waiting in line to actually get on the ride, but I remember that part more than anything else in this ride, is just seeing kind of the walls expand, and I just thought that was really cool, and I couldn't help but smile when I saw that part in this movie. Moving on to the so-so, and the first thing I have here is the humor. Now, the humor in this movie was pretty hit or miss, and I do understand that this is a movie geared towards kids and family, so yes, some of the jokes are going to be pretty cheesy, but at times there were some jokes that felt kind of forced in this movie. Now there also were some jokes that were genuinely funny. More specifically, Danny DeVito was probably the funniest character in this movie. I mean, Tiffany Haddish had some quips here and there, and Owen Wilson had a couple here and there too. But Danny DeVito had some one-liners in this movie that I just thought were hilarious. So overall, the humor in this movie wasn't bad by any means. I just think they mistimed some of the jokes at certain points in this movie. And next up for the so-so, I have the story, and I don't think the story was bad by any means, but I also can't say it was all that great either. Now, don't get me wrong, this story definitely did have its moments, but overall, it just wasn't very engaging in my opinion. I definitely wasn't going into this movie expecting a deep, fleshed out story because, let's be honest, this is a Haunted Mansion movie, and that's not what this movie is trying to be, nor what I expect it to be. But there were some points in this story where it really didn't progress much at all. Also, I feel like the rules of the Haunted Mansion were a little weird. I mean, they couldn't leave because they were haunted, but in order to progress the story, they had to leave the mansion in order to go on these little quests and find out what they needed to find out. And it just seemed like later in the movie, when they were leaving the mansion, there was really no problem at all with them being haunted. The ghost would just follow them around and wouldn't really be like a problem. I just feel like it would have been cool to have a little bit more consequences when they left the mansion, because it was kind of inconsistent throughout the whole movie in terms of being haunted when they left the mansion, if that makes sense. Now getting into the bad, and the thing I have here is this movie definitely could have been about 20 to 30 minutes shorter. Now, the middle of this movie did get pretty slow. We were on all these side missions to kind of figure out how they were going to essentially escape this mansion. And since we figured out the plot of this movie pretty early on, it does kind of take a while to finally get that moving and for them to finally start making progress on the plot. For instance, I think it would have been cool to have Crump's hat located in the Haunted Mansion so they didn't have to go to Crump's actual house to find it. And in my opinion, I think this would have fit the story a little bit better, because I feel like the more we stay in the Haunted Mansion, I feel like the better this movie is. I think all the good parts, even though it was most of the movie, but most of the parts that I really enjoyed took place in the Haunted Mansion, and I think the longer we could have stayed there, I think the better this movie would have got. And in turn, I think this would have made the movie just a bit shorter as well. But those are just my thoughts on it. At the end of the day, I'm just a guy who likes to talk about movies. So all in all, this movie is just okay in my opinion. It's a fun family film made for kids that definitely has some moments in there that are pretty good. I like the last third of this movie, but I would probably wait to watch this movie until it comes out on streaming. Those are my thoughts on Haunted Mansion. Be sure to let me know what you thought of the movie down in the comments. And as always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shop easyapparel.com. God bless, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.